It's always smart though, and it's always a weird moment when you start these things to go, "Are we live? Are we live?"
Exactly. We
I've been a
are
part of
maybe
many "Are we live?"
live. Oh, cool. My producer over here says that we are live, so
Nice.
A game. Hello, everyone, and thank you, Alex Brightman, for joining us today.
My pleasure. I like being here. I like doing these things.
Me too. We love having you here. And the excitement on social media for you coming on today has just been like exploding. Have you
Oh, good.
felt, yeah, have you felt all the fan love?
I have. You know, it's a wealth of amazing things because I wake up I'm very lucky because I've done a couple shows that have gotten a lot of big fan bases. And so what that means is that there are like certain lifers who just kind of come along with you, whatever you're doing. But what that also means is that you tend to wake up every morning with some really nice things in your social media. So if you have anxiety like I do, and if you have depression like I do, there are little bits where you kind of can dig into a bit of a treasure trove of like really nice compliments or really nice drawings of you. And like, it's just really amazing to have people just enjoy you enough to like, you know, out of nowhere want to reach out. So that's very nice. And I
Yeah,
appreciate everyone watching. I'll try to think of new things to say.
no, it's perfect. And if y'all see or hear a dog that there's Slim. Slim wanted to say hi to everyone. So we have our cute puppers here and Kevin!
Mr. Kevin always sits next to me. It's become a trend now. I'll come into here to do, he knows that when I come into this room, it's because I'm going to be on a Zoom thing or something. And he follows me right in and curls right where you see him right now. It's amazing.
I love it. And, you know, there's something so nice about having a dog in our lives. And I've heard you say before that, like, Kevin gets stopped on the street more than you do sometimes.
I watch people. I will walk down New York. When New York was a city still, we would walk down this. You know, I'd take him to the theater sometimes, walk around Midtown, and I'd see people. This happened. A person walked out of a building, at their office building, not a theater. Was looking down, saw Kevin, recognized Kevin, looked up, saw me. It was in that order. So it was not the other way around.
It's amazing.
So it was kind of amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's happened here too, which is even crazier.
Yeah, so I saw the photo that a few girls saw you walking your dog. What was that like?
Yes. I now have seen them more than once. They walk in the morning and we walk. So now it's like it was kind of crazy at first, and now it's just sort of like, hi there. It was nice. It was, you know, it was one of those like weird Twilight Zone, like, you know, I don't think, you know, I think fame is a weird thing. It's not, I don't believe that I am famous. I know famous people and their life is very different than mine. Like I am known pretty well within 12 blocks in New York City. Like that's where I am. That's where one of those places where I know that inevitably someone might stop me and say, I know where you're from. But it never, ever has happened this way, where I'm walking in very, very rural, suburban Oklahoma, and somebody's not only recognizes me, but when they recognize me, had the Beetlejuice sweatshirt on. It was like perfect, little weird moment, and it really lifted everyone's spirits here, and it was fun. It was like a very mutually exciting moment.
Yeah, and it's so cool to see people in other spaces when you're not expecting them at all. I feel like that just like, it is funny, like living in New York and now being in Washington State. Like I have not run into anyone, weirdly enough. But you know,
no one's recognized you.
I know. It's like, hey, I'm bwaySHO. Come on.
Please.
As if. But yeah, like I would see Broadway people on the subway sometimes, and it's like, oh right, they're humans as well.
Yes, that's right. I like to jokingly say whenever I'm like picking up Kevin's poop, I go, stars, they're just like us. But yeah, no, it's been very nice living. It's really nice living. I've said this before a couple of times now that this whole quarantine thing has happened, but it's very nice to be in a place for my sort of anxiety and dread and you know, anybody's, but it's nice to have a space. Like we're living in a house, which is like very luxurious in times like this if you're from New York. Yeah. So we're just trying to make the best of it in the way we can. And the way we can is just staying put. And so we're just doing that. We're trying to make fun. We're trying to make, you know, we're trying to remember what day it is every day.
True.
Which does get hard. And really kind of figure out what a weekday looks like now. Mm-hmm. And if there is like work to do, then we do it, like, because it's a weekday. So we shouldn't just, we're not thinking of this as a snow day. Right. Like we're looking at this as a pause, but like we shouldn't let ourselves go mentally, physically, and otherwise.
Yeah, and so on that subject, have you been keeping up with, like, I've seen you've been keeping up with the Beetlejuice family, but have you been keeping up with the Beetlejuice voice and that part?
Yeah, trying. I mean, it's not. It is certainly not a natural thing for me. It's now become more natural since I've learned it, but it goes away. I took 3 days off here and there during the run to shoot a movie, or even just to take 3 days off for a little mental health. And when you come back, your voice is almost like too healthy to do the voice. So now it's been over 3 weeks, and so I have to, like, I have these moments where I am keeping myself in check and just sort of doing it, and everyone here knows why I do that. No one here is shocked by the thing. So I am trying. It's going to take a minute though. If we get back before June, which is more and more unlikely every day, but if we do, then I'll have to really actually take a couple moments and days to like get down to like a square one with my voice again, because this was completely unexpected.
Right. And that's what's so crazy about it is, especially early on, it was hard to tell how serious it would be. And then
Yeah.
the Olivier's got canceled, and then the Tony Awards got moved, and, two-time Tony nominee yourself, like what do you think is going through people's heads, or what's going through your head?
I think people, I can definitely speak for me, but I think just having spoken to a number of people that I trust that they're telling me the truth and not trying to feel just like blindly optimistic, I think that people are, I think people think this is going to go on a lot longer. And I think that's the fear, is that we don't have a real date. If somebody said, even if it changed, somebody said, all right, June 13th, we'll be getting ready to come back. Then at least you can know in your heart and brain, okay, that's a number I can get my head around. That's some days I can put in between. And it can change and let you down and all that kind of stuff. But having zero information is the worst. It's the worst thing. And I'd rather have bad information in a weird way about that, obviously. So I think a lot of people are feeling dread.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people are. I was just talking to my three best friends on Zoom today. I was talking to F. Michael Haney and Andrew Kober and Drew. We were all on a Zoom together, and we literally did like what we would do if you were in we just said, how are you feeling? How's your mental health? And we each got a chance to say, and it's this sort of similar vibe of like, I feel like I am my identity. Like my job is my identity, because as an actor and a creative person, it's sort of, you are your business and your brand. And so when that goes away, who the hell are you? Yeah. And so a lot of, we're feeling it in varying degrees, but like, I get it. I completely get it, because it's like, and it would have been a lot different if it really all just tapered down. It was like an emergency break, no more show.
Yeah.
So you go from doing this for nearly a year. We had been doing Beetlejuice, and then right away, no show, not like two more left, no show.
Right.
So my last show in Beetlejuice, I was out with an injury 3 days before the shutdown. So my last show was not even the last show that they did. Wow. So like my possible final show in Beetlejuice could be that show. We don't know. And so that's those feelings where you're like, I hope it's not, but I know how time works, and I know what things, are, but I am realistically optimistic. Like I am optimistic as they come, right. But I also understand how things work.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get people sick.
Right. And that's the whole thing, is making sure that if it does come back, it is the right time, and not to force it or whatever. But that is such an interesting thought, is, they couldn't have just said, okay, tomorrow is the last one, or even tonight. It was so sudden. And I had actually, the night before, I was just at home in my pajamas, and my friend was like, hey, I have an extra ticket for 6 in 45 minutes if you can be here. And I was like, yes. And I just changed.
And you went.
And I went. And that was like my last Broadway show for the time being.
Wow.
And it's just crazy to think, if I was like, nah, I think I'd rather stay at home. I mean, it's basically the same thing, but, I feel grateful that I, had that opportunity and had that moment of, this might be my last Broadway show for a while.
Yeah, I am very interested. One of the things I love to fascinate about is tracking backwards. Like because you can't look forward. You can only either live in the moment or track backwards and analyze. So it is weird. I always am fascinated with the idea of, once this is all over, mm-hmm. Where was this? Right. Like, are we in the beginning still? Are we in the middle? Like, and you don't know. You can't know. And it fascinates me and terrifies me in equal measure, but more fascinated because like it always is weird to go, was that my last show? I don't know. But you can't know. You can't. That's why I don't like speculation. That's why I try not to read any news that's not tabloidy and sensational news. But yeah, it's very, very an odd feeling. And I think what you just said is right. It wasn't like we had a warning. So it actually, what it started to feel like, and by the way, when I knew it was bad is when we were watching a basketball game. Mm-hmm. We like the Oklahoma City Thunder. We have a subscription package to watch the games. And we watched the game where they said, everyone get off the court. We're canceling this game. And we were like, what? And we had heard that like one of the players had like tested, they positive, but this was before anyone knew things were like really bad. And we're like, if they're canceling this, and then the next day they shut down the NBA, we were like, the NBA is much bigger than Broadway, mm-hmm. and pulls in a lot more fans. So we were like, something's wrong. And then so I was walking my dog and got a phone call from my manager saying Broadway is closed, and it felt like an evacuation. Right. It was like they said you have till 5 p.m. today to get whatever you need from the theater, and then you cannot come back. Whoa! Which was like out of a science fiction movie. We were just like, wait, what? Like your whole life had to pivot. Like I had a plan for that day, and part of that day was doing my show. Not only was I not going to get to do my show that night, but I had 4 more hours to go and run to the theater if I needed to. I didn't, but if I needed to get something, I only had that much time, and they were going to lock the doors and not let anyone else in. So it was crazy.
That is bonkers. Yeah, it is crazy to think of timing, because between being in 6 and leaving 6, I was getting flooded with texts like international travel is being limited, the NBA is shut down, and Tom Hanks has coronavirus.
Yeah, and the biggest news of all.
And just like hearing those 3 things in the span of a show.
Right.
That's like...
It's scary. It was very scary. And that was the reason when, the Broadway shut down, and then my wife's job was affected, and so her job got shut down. We both were like, we have a place that's not New York City. Let's go. Yeah. So we drove. It was our very first road trip, actually. But it was very fun. And we took our dog, obviously. He did great, and got a chance we belted out show tunes like a cliche, industry couple. We belted out, we downloaded like 18 different cast albums over the course of, 2 days, sung through all of them.
Amazing. Do you have like a go-to cast album that you guys like to sing along to?
We love Parade. Nice. Dear Evan Hansen's always such a fun sing-along, and so is Next to Normal, really fun sing-along. We did Last 5 Years. Nice. We do like the ones that have like, hit after hit after hit. We try not to we did Wicked, which was fun. We hadn't listened to that in a long time. Yeah. And I got to explain as it was going on, because I was in it over 10 years ago for 2 years. And I explained for the very first time, it seemed like to my wife, what I did during the moments on stage. And it was really fun to really weirdly relive that, because it was so long ago in my head.
Yeah. Yeah. Is it weird to go back to shows like that or School of Rock where like that was your voice in the moment?
Yes, that was, it's always really, it's strange, and it's so eye-opening to look back at what you looked like and what you talked like and what your thoughts were. I remember if you catch me in any, I only thankfully got a chance to really be interviewed a ton of times between School of Rock and now. Mm-hmm. I didn't really get a ton of interview opportunities during Matilda when I was there for 8 months replacing. Right. But it's weird when you see how your answer, I was okay at interviewing. I was okay at being questioned and trying to keep a conversation going, but it's kind of amazing to watch now, old football tape, and be like, oh, that's what I But it was, it was fine. I feel like I, learned a lot during trying to be an improv guy, that it helps to sort of be constantly on your toes and thinking of things. So that helps with interviews for sure.
Yeah. And I kind of prefer these live interviews like what we're doing now, because it just feels more free flowing, and you almost don't overthink it because you don't have the time to.
Yeah, I the only pre-interview I've ever done was for Seth Meyers when I went on, because they want to make sure you're not batshit crazy. Or just that you know how to talk, or you won't freeze up. So they give you but they do it like they just someone that calls you and goes like, so you were this. They ask you sort of like baited sort of questions that he might ask. So you get a sense throughout that day, the next day, you kind of like formulate ideas of answers just because you have so little time on the couch. That I was very happy that I actually did think about them and rather than just try to wing it, because it is television and they can't edit around you really.
Yep.
But that was it. Everything else, I liked doing this off the cuff because I wouldn't think of certain things if I knew I was trying to think on a certain track.
Yep. That totally makes sense. And to all the fans watching saying, hey, I have some questions, we are taking note of them. We will get to them. We love your enthusiasm. We actually
I'm interested to see if anybody has a question I haven't answered before. It's rare, but it happens.
Oh, cool. We love some breaking news or some different.
I'll at least attempt to answer any question.
Awesome. So we have some really cool, Beetlejuice inspired Post-it notes here that we're
okay, great.
We're gonna
Thank you so much. I feel very at home.
Excellent. So Haley asks, with all the different projects you're working on, which ones do you tend to be drawn to work on first?
That is a great question. I've gotten that one before, but that is a great question because it changes all the time. Right now, I've switched so crazily breakneck hard into writing because I sort of can't perform. I mean, I'm not really good doing this sort of, I'm not mucking up anybody else who's like Laura Benanti, Stephanie J. Block doing these incredible initiatives to get people to wash their hands and donate. And by performing, I have a very hard time performing like this. So I'm just not doing it. Yeah. But I have switched so crazily hard into writing that is what's taking a lot of my time up. I'm writing 2 plays, which I will dive into in a moment. And then I'm writing a musical with my friend Drew Gasparini. We're writing 2 actually right now. One is based on the movie It's Kind of a Funny Story, which is also based on the novel written by Ned Vizzini. And the other was based on the children's novel The Whipping Boy. That a lot of people have read, and we had worked on it forever. We had a draft ready to go. We did a reading of it, and then we just sort of realized bit by bit that maybe it's not a stage show. Maybe this is an animated musical. And so we are now totally working on the animated version and trying to see if somebody would bite and kind of like give it a shot and make it happen. I think it would be really beautiful.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and then the 2 plays I'm working on. One is called Everything is Fine, and it's about a family of 3 dealing with the tragedy of their son who went into a mall and shot a lot of people, including himself. And they're trying to deal 2 years later with, 1, the son applying for college, and 2, how do you live in the same spot where that happened if you were connected somehow to the atrocity and weren't a victim? And you actually had the last name of the perpetrator. And how do you ever escape that identity? Is it possible? And so it's about a family just dealing with that type of idea in a place where nobody likes you. And then the other one is equally as dark and weird, it's called We Left It Here, which is about 5 guys coming home to California for their 6th friend's funeral, and then going to their old high school. They're all about 40, and digging up a time capsule that they had buried last week of senior year. And inside, they find all the things that they remember, and then they find something else inside that is much darker and sort of a secret that none of them really believe they were involved in until it gets unearthed. And the rest of the night plays out them figuring out how it got in there, what's going on, and were we ever really friends? Yeah, so it's not it's not joyous. It's not a musical. And then the only other thing I'm working on, which is like it's not early stages, I just haven't cracked on it for a while until I've been here, is another play that is about, it's called Slow Children. And it's about, I don't write very funny plays. I write I like to answer questions with plays. And I really wanted to write a play about morality, and I really wanted to write a 12 Angry Men type play. Because I love 12 Angry Men, and I wanted to write a play about just a ton of debate and ton of like getting people to change sides. And so it's about a school board meeting, very benign school board meeting about whether they should spend school funds on a stop sign and a speed bump on both sides of the school, because a third grader with Down syndrome was hit and run and killed. It seems like a seemingly easy answer. Yes, of course we should. But then as you find out kind of everybody's sort of like proclivities and what their actual, feelings are towards certain people. And it means a lot to me because my dad is the founder of the Disability Solutions Group at Apple Computer when it first started. And he's been sort of the big guy in that world of like accessibility in the world of like Google and AT&T. So like the reason a lot of these accessibility features on the phone came from my dad's thing. And I always wanted to write something involving developmental disabilities. I just didn't want it to feel like kind of like a praise piece or anything that felt like too sappy. So I made it more about morality than anything else. And I want to finish it because I think it's actually really good.
That's fascinating. I didn't know a lot about that. And it is so interesting that you play these great characters in musicals, but then the other part of your brain is like, well, let's get down to some of the serious business and plays.
I think a ton. I think a lot of the thoughts I have are questions about, and the idea of, but with Slow Children is actually about that fascination of tracking backwards. Like that kid would never have been hit by that car and then you can go back 40 steps, but all those 40 things had to happen for that car to hit him. And the idea of how perfect car accidents are. In when you actually think about them, so many idiosyncratic things have to happen. So I always think about those things, and those things, dark stuff fascinates me, and also I didn't plan on having a theme with the plays that I wrote, but it's all about kind of pulling back the curtain on something you really aren't privy to, like a school board meeting about this. No one hears about these things, or the family of a perpetrator. The lives of toxic men, like the toxic masculine men group that no girls allowed type atmosphere. And I was privy to those. And I went to an all boys Jesuit school and got to be near and sometimes in really, 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 looking back on it now, really, really bad conversations that I regret knowing about, hearing about, being involved in. And so you get to thinking about those. And once you become a writer, you're like, I should just write this.
Yeah. No, I find that fascinating. I was a reporter in West Texas for 2 years, and
oh, no way.
Yeah, so CBS 7, your breaking news and weather authority.
Oh, you got the voice for sure.
Oh, thank you. And it was so fascinating being a Jewish girl from New York, being in West Texas, and sitting in on these fascinating things that I never thought that I would hear firsthand, and I never thought I'd be reporting on. And and you get to know people on that like personal level that you just never thought, do I really have that much in common with them? And you do, and you find out where your brain kind of connects and where it says, well, I want to take a turn there.
Yeah, and I think by writing them too, and by seeing things from these people's angles, you do start to kind of go to yourself and go, wow, I'm not perfect either. Like I sort of have some of these thoughts too. I certainly don't act on them, but I certainly don't not have them. And so it was interesting to exercise them onto the page. And I always find, and this is advice I give to writers anyway, so I'm sure there are some listening, that when somebody says, if you're talking to somebody, you're telling them a story about anything, and someone goes, man, you can't write that kind of stuff, write it. Sure you can. Yes, you can. It's one of the weirdest phrases to me. When someone goes, man, you can't write it. I'm like, it happened. Write it. So anytime I am telling a story and I find that more than one or two people are extremely compelled, I'm like, interesting. And I sort of take note and go, maybe that is a germ of a story, or that will go into an episode of a television show that I plan to write. This is an episode. It's not a movie, but it's certainly an episode.
No, that's great advice.
I think so too.
Yeah. And I'd love to kind of use what you were talking about, accessibility, and pivot to say about stuttering.
Yes.
That was such a fascinating conversation we were having at Paul Rudd's 8th annual All-Star Bowling event for Say. I think I nailed it.
It's way too long, especially for people that stutter.
That's a good.
Having been a much worse stutterer, worse off stutterer when I was a child, the stutterer in me is like, can we shorten that?
Yeah, and so can you tell us a little bit about growing up with that, and the advice that you'd like to share for people watching now. I actually invited Say to come along and comment if there's anything we
Oh,
say that.
good. Awesome. I can't wait to do more stuff. I mean, I honestly can't. I'm chomping at the bit to like do more stuff and sing the morning song on Instagram one of these days. And I ended up that night in the bowling thing. I ended up sponsoring a kid to go to the camp, and I'm like so psyched to like hear about it and then eventually go, because I did not have that when I was a kid, and if I did, I didn't know that I did. No one told me about it. Certainly, it wasn't Say, but yeah, it was horrible. I mean, truly one of those, like, it was crippling. And when I say crippling, it was like I couldn't even get the beginning of a word to even get to my throat. It was like in my chest. And so when it got bad, it was bad and nobody could help me. And you feel completely useless and you feel totally less than. Doesn't help that, like, when you're a kid, you're surrounded by other kids, and kids are horrible. I don't mean that, but most kids are not great when with trying to deal with something uncomfortable. So they turn it into making fun or trying to embarrass you because they don't know that it's okay to go, "Are you all right?" They don't know that yet. So it took me out of school. Some days I would go to the nurse's office and I would pretend I was sick, and I would come home in tears. And I had a speech therapist once and once only, and he was awful. And if I knew his name, I would say it, but I don't. I would. It made it worse. It made me feel like I was like a badly trained dog. And so I don't know who this guy was, but if you know who I am, then screw you. But yeah, I mean, the Say thing, the minute I heard about Say, I was enamored with it. And so I've only become more in love with the idea of it and what I can do aside from donating, which is obvious. It's that thing. It's like, yeah, but what else? So yeah, I love those guys, and I love Noah, and I love all. It just was such a blast to do that, and they're doing it so right, and totally normalizing stuttering by not normalizing it, like by being like, because that's the last thing somebody who knows a lot about developmental disabilities, because I was around it my entire life, is that the last thing someone wants is for you to like pretend someone doesn't have something. Like, a person in a wheelchair wants you to mention it. They don't want you to pick, but they don't want you to be like, "Oh, I didn't even notice you were in a wheelchair." It's like, yeah, of course, it's like, it's there.
Right.
By not noticing it, by not engaging about it, it makes it even a bigger deal.
Right.
And so I love the way that their casual way of celebrating people that are different. They do it almost better than anyone I've ever seen.
Yeah. No, I love them so much. I first went to their, when they were honoring Tommy Kail.
Yep.
And it was cool just being a fly on the wall. Like, I got to do some interviews. I filmed Chris Jackson singing "This Is Me" with the Say Ensemble. And
awesome.
Watching those kids who had previously just been on the stage giving a speech, and then seeing them feel so empowered singing, I was crying. Like, it was just one of the best things you could get, is seeing kids feel like they have a community and feeling empowered.
Yeah. There is nothing better than being seen. I know it's called Say, but there is literally nothing better than when somebody sees you. There is a moment in Matilda, and it makes me cry thinking about it. When Matilda's the weird one in class, and Miss Honey inevitably sees something in her that nobody is seeing, and then in the middle of class, she kind of takes her aside and goes, "I got you this stack of books. And you can sit there and read. I know these lessons are too easy for you. You can sit here and read all the time. And if you need more, I will do my best to. And if you have trouble reading them, I will do my best to help you." And there's a big silence. And then she hugs her. That's her response. Is for the first time ever, someone saw her. Yeah. And so I'm tearing up right now as I'm saying it. And it's just that exactly right. That moment when you see a kid who's like, "Oh, good, somebody understands me and sees me." There's nothing better than that. And there's nothing more compelling to me than watching that on stage or in something. Yeah. Because that's when you really get everything you want, is just to be seen. It's like, money is great and accolades are great, but when somebody goes, "I see you in there," that's like a beautiful thing.
Yeah, no, that's very well said. And that's the beauty of having the camp Say. Like, I went to this sleepaway camp. It's like New Jersey YCAM's Jewish camp, and just feeling like, oh, I'm that kind of weird one at school, but here where we're all just like playing around and having fun, like I'm a normal, cool kid. Like, that stuff makes a difference. And like, I've suffered from anxiety my whole life. and being told like, oh, other people do too, and it's
Yeah.
okay. It's
Not only other people, but most people.
yeah.
That's what you really do find, is that you are really part of a majority. It turns out, when you thought you are the only one, it turns out you're actually not that interesting when you have anxiety. It
Yeah,
turns out tons of people have it. So,
it's
and
amazing.
I also found that with this quarantine, people that have anxiety actually have been preparing for this our whole lives. This is
Exactly.
actually, I was like, this is cool. I'm good. I
Like
feel
I've
this way all the
already
time.
planned out what I would have done.
Yeah, totally. I mean, a lot of these people, I've talked to a number of people that are like that. They're like, yeah, this doesn't feel much different.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we have a few more questions here. The questions are just pouring in. Y'all are amazing. Thank you so much. Um,
If you need me to come back to answer more, I have nowhere to go. So I'm always willing to come back on.
Very much appreciate it. You are wonderful, Alex. Thank you.
If you'll have me. I don't want to force myself.
Alex Brightman, I mean, if you happen to want to come back on bwaySHO YouTube, I think we could make it happen.
Okay, it's a deal. Kevin, what do you think? Totally asleep.
In my last interview, Slim was just sleeping on the couch and just snoring very loudly.
Oh, Kevin is dead asleep.
Oh man, I love dogs so much. And just pre this question, I just want to say like, I heard you talking about how like just hugs in general and like human contact is probably like the hardest part right now of people who
Yes.
are quarantining alone.
Yes.
Like, and a lot of animal shelters are having people foster, which is I think a great thing right now. So just if there, you have
Great
any
idea.
thoughts on that?
I do. I think that's great, especially because dogs can't catch the thing. So go play. I mean, there's not, and also fostering does not. It is as no harm as it gets. If you really truly aren't for this dog, then it is. Unfortunately, you can give it to somebody else, but or give it back and all that. But hopefully, you'll find like the best thing in the world, and you can get free hugs whenever you want because they're your dog and they don't really have a say in the matter. Um, so it is a good thing. I think they should be. I think those places should be empty because people should be craving contact, and dogs are one of the best kinds. So
Yeah.
I'm very happy to have Kevin here. I have the luxury of having humans here too, but for those that don't, I would say if you can, and I know it's expensive, so if you can, do it. If not, don't feel guilty, but
Totally. Yeah.
yeah, sure.
Totally co-sign. Dogs are the best. Okay, Christina asks, how much do you interiorize a character like Beetlejuice or Dewey in your day-to-day life?
Beetlejuice all day. No, uh, it's everything I try to play. I mean, I didn't know that I was doing this until I really thought about it. But everything I try to play has a bit of me in it. I think it's much harder to really disconnect your entire self from something that you're doing. What's great about the two roles I got to really play, and not only play but help create, were that both of them in their own way were like little mini exorcisms for my feelings. And so I could nightly, if I wanted to, feel a certain way and do a performance a certain way, and the show wouldn't be any different. The show wouldn't suffer in a certain way if I was feeling happy, sad, anxious, terrified, whatever. I would use that in moments where Dewey did, and found different moments. And it really helped to have these characters be a little bit of me in there, because if I did get to the theater and felt I'd gone through something, or if something was wrong, or even if something was incredibly right, it's very hard to play angry when you're happy. It was a nice way to sort of be able to be multicolored inside and outside for Beetlejuice. But yeah, I think I don't internalize them necessarily in my daily life. Like, I don't ever snap into them, and I am, for those that know me, mostly off screen, but some on screen. I have a filthy sense of humor, and so that was very easy to tap into for with the creation of it and sort of the playing. But yeah, no, I mean, I tend to be pretty nice and engaging. So a lot of the standoffishness of those characters and sort of the Dewey's hatred for children. I don't hate children. I don't love them, but I don't hate them, certainly. Yeah.
Were there any rituals or something you would do before Beetlejuice, just to kind of get into the mood?
I always, this has been for years. I always just got into listening to stand-up comedy. It's the same. I've listened to every single album that there is, and when new ones come out, I devour them. I always watch stand-up specials, and if I have the time, if a new stand-up special comes out, I will watch them twice over, back to back.
Wow.
Because the first time it's like the experience of it, and then the second time I'm listening to the joke writing and just in being interested in why that word and what this cadence was about, and because these people have worked on it for a year usually before they put something on screen. So I know everything by heart. It's not about finding anything funny. It's just about hearing other comedians and other funny people be funny before I get on stage, so that I can live in that world and also hear laughter before I get on stage, which is nice to sort of feel like you're not running directly into something. It's like you've been feeling and vibing with comedy before the stage. And other than that, it's just a stretch and a small warm up, because a lot of my shows I tend to get pretty warm pretty quickly. So I don't need to warm up all that much. I do the regular, make sure the voice is there, make sure my real voice is there, know my limits, because it's different from show to show, and know where I would need to either tone it down here or whatever like that. So it's a small little like engine check before I go on.
It's amazing. What I saw in one of the comments, people asking like, what's your favorite number to perform? And like, what an opening number in Beetlejuice.
Yeah, amazing. And that's a question. I think it's a funny question. I was just talking about that. I was like, it's a question for sure. But what's the question? You know what I mean? It's like there's 12 answers to give to that question. And so just by going to the opening number, I feel like is an unsatisfying answer to the question that I don't think you wanted to ask. But I will say that was the hardest. The opening number was the hardest one to nail down tonally, because it's a weird show. It is a show that lets you know it's a show. So at every turn, you're suspending your disbelief, but we've told you from the beginning, I'm an actor, I'm reading lines, you're an audience, this will be over in 2.5 hours, and this is a show. Right. Which I think is great. We just couldn't figure out the right way to do it. And finally, when we did, we sort of figured it out in DC, but we really figured it out when we got in rehearsals in New York, and really leaned into sort of the MC aspect of Beetlejuice and the sort of ringmaster quality. And that he was happy to see people. That was not in DC. He was really crass and crude and didn't want friends and he really just wanted to connive and be brutally mean to people. Right. And in the big change that in New York, he's just a guy that's lonely, that wants friends and would do anything to get it. I think that's where we turn the corner, why the opening number is so successful. It's like, you guys are here, And so that made him more, palatable. So by the time he turned into the bad guy, you sort of forgot.
Fair. No, I love it. It's funny. I've seen it 3 times now, but that's a good way of saying it. As you're going on that journey. Well,
you forget. I mean, they've written him the way that they did, and we've decided very pointedly to make him that way, because until he really turned, you were kind of like rooting for him. Yeah. That's the whole idea. And you're not. You're definitely not.
Yeah, and Creepy Old Guy, I think, is one of the most brilliant songs, because it's like, thank you for just saying it.
Right. I couldn't believe that made it to Broadway. I mean, I loved the song. I was a huge advocate of the song being in the show, because it made it a theatrical experience and a comment, a point of view, a take that the movie or cartoon didn't have, nor do most shows have this comment. So I love that they kept it in, and the reaction it gets, thankfully, is good and not offensive. It's just like, yeah, this is a thing that we experience every day and no one talks about.
Yep, exactly. So speaking about DC, Cindy asks, with the Winter Garden being such a unique theater, did the set change from the run in DC?
No, very little, because what we did, the DC stage actually was, I believe, a little bigger than the Winter Garden, I think. And I think what we did was close in the proscenium a little bit to give it the specs of what would be the Winter Garden. So the set was built for the Winter Garden. Or a stage like the Winter Garden. I think they didn't have it locked down by DC. I'm not 100% sure. I forget. No, yes, we did. And so I think they did build it to the specs of the Winter Garden, and then sort of spaced the National Theater in a way, like smash down the proscenium here and here, and build out the stage or build back up the stage where we needed to sort of mock what the Winter Garden would be. You can't mock the Winter Garden's length. It's a very long stage. And so the depth of it is similar to any other thing. But once we got to the Winter Garden, it was a much bigger run from each side of the stage.
Yeah.
And that was the only difference that I felt. So yeah, a lot of the same set.
David Corns is just brilliant.
He doesn't create sets. He creates characters.
Yeah.
I think his sets are, it's too living to be a set. It's a character.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I love just kind of going through his like Twitter or Instagram and seeing all the different sets he's created or characters in this case. Because it's just, you feel like, oh, that makes it come alive in this different way.
Yeah, our show wouldn't be what it is even close if it wasn't the collaboration between Alex Timbers and David Corns.
Yeah.
It's just, and the lighting and projection goes along. They all work together super closely and in tandem so that it's like when you look at the set, what you're actually looking at is set, projection, and lighting. Nothing moved without the other. So it couldn't. And the lighting and projection is the first time I've seen lighting and projection work together that closely in any show that I've seen.
Yeah. Wow. Very cool.
Yeah.
So I love this next question, especially because Wicked was one of my favorite shows growing up. Like, I did that in-person lottery for years before I got it, and then finally got to go again recently. So that certainly holds like a special place.
Very excited about this question.
Yeah. The Disabled Gamer asks, were there any favorite bits or mishaps from the Bach and Nessa storyline in Wicked?
The Disabled Gamer, by the way, is named Alan, and he is a great. He is easily. He's like been privy to almost every Zoom Q&A I've been, and he got our show really close before we closed down with his family. They're from Ireland. So what's up, Alan? I'm sure I'll see just this clip on Twitter the minute this is over. What's up? Hope your family is good. But yes, there was one big mishap that I was involved in, is that I'm only on stage for 12 minutes in that show. Very small role for being a principal role, timing-wise. So in the end, my last scene in Act 1 is the train station scene where he brings them to go off to the Emerald City, and he wheels on Nessa, and then Glinda calls him Bick for what is the very last time, because he turns to her and says, "It's Bach, and I can't do this anymore." And he runs away. He runs the length of the stage off. And Nessa, gives chase. It's Bach, come back. And sorry, and they're fine. They go to the Emerald City. So that's my last scene in Act 1. And then I'm done for 45 minutes until Act 2, until I enter in Act 2. So it's a 45-minute break, easy. In Act 1, over a year into my run there, during an Act 1, I left the stage thinking it was my last scene in the act. And it wasn't. So I went upstairs, took off my clothes, had just my slider, like black sort of like compression shorts and white t-shirt and my mic belt, in my hair and my mic and a hat, my little yarmulke, my little Bach yarmulke. And I'm chilling. I'm hanging out. And I hear on the monitor what sounds like what I usually hear right before I come on for my last scene in Act 1. And I have a full-blown panic attack. Heart drops to my butt, and I have no shoes on. I just have literally black underwear, a white t-shirt, and a mic belt on. So I run. There's all this hanging clothing that has your stuff on it. I run into it, and I just grab it, and I start running downstairs with like not even half of my costume. It was like Dr. Dillamond's costume, and as I'm running, I'm like peeking things, and I'm putting like half a sleeve on, and I'm putting on stuff that's definitely not the right costume. And I end up making it on stage in time. And I was wearing black patent leather shoes, no pants, the silver Governor's Mansion jacket from Act 2, and my red yarmulke that I already had on. And it was open. So just like mic belt and white shirt, and then open jacket, no pants, black shoes. And I'm standing there and I'm vibrating. I'm shaking so hard, thinking to myself, this will be my last performance ever on Broadway ever, or in any theater. And I'm sitting there and nobody notices for the first couple seconds because they're doing the scene until I can't remember who this is. I have to figure out when this was because I want to cast it the right way. Whoever was playing Elphaba turns and sees me and then turns back like this because she sees what's going on. And then slowly The only person that didn't really see it was, I believe, who was playing Nessa Rose, because I'm in back of her.
Oh, okay.
And the Glinda starts, and they start trying to get through their lines, and they're starting to laugh. And then she calls me Bick, and I'm not looking at any of them. And I'm laughing too, because what else are you going to do? Yeah. I look at Glinda and I say, it's Bach, and I can't do this anymore. And then I have to run the entire length of the stage with ensemble members in the train station on the thing, a single person running the length of the Gershwin Theater stage off to stage left into what I was assuming was going to be an unemployment letter. Obviously they were not thrilled, but they were like, it's show business. What are you going to do? I had been a pretty letter perfect Bach up until that moment. So they didn't think it was me being lazy or sabotaging the show. It was mortifying, and it makes for a really good story now. But for weeks after, I believe I had bought everybody Mrs. Fields' cookie cake that just said, I'm sorry on it. But that, I'll never forget that moment. I've never had a moment like that since. And I imagine it's because that one was so big. Yeah. So thanks, Alan, for letting me relive that horrifying stage mishap.
Thank you for that question. Whew, I love it. Is sometimes fun because, you know, you want the show to run smoothly and the show must go on. But there is something so cool about someone who knows their lines and their roles so well that they can play off of each other when something goes wrong or a piece doesn't come or something like that happens.
We did, Beetlejuice had a couple of those like great little tiny moments. And I always like to say, there's nothing better for me ever. And I mean this, if something goes wrong on stage and nobody gets hurt, it's my favorite thing in the world. When a show goes off the rails in a certain way, people freak out about that. That is where I am my most alive. That is one of my most comfortable, is when there is chaos on stage, as long as nobody is hurt. But we've had stoppages but the best part about Beetlejuice is that people know it's a show. We've set it up to we can't fail. So we've had moments where we had to stop. And I think we lifted the curtain during previews after the stop, and it was an applause that we were back. And I just said, in a vamp, I just said, previously on Beetlejuice. And they went wild. It's like things like that, or, certain things like that, which is a blast. So you get to sort of you get to go, hey, we see you too. We see the audience as well. It's communal. It's a community thing.
Yeah, Beetlejuice has this unique energy about it that it's just, it's special. When I was there on Halloween, it was like people knew that was an event. They wanted to be there. They were dressed up.
It was electric. That was crazy. That was a crazy night. That month was crazy because we did something every day, and that was insane. Yeah. But Halloween specifically was crazy. It was like the whole theater felt like a soccer stadium. People just were going crazy. I don't hear things like that very, often in theater. Oh, Kevin just woke up.
Hi,
Kevin.
Hey, Kevin.
He licks his chops like an old man when he wakes up. He's like,
hello.
He's back to sleep now.
Yeah, I love Slim has gotten really good at moving his paw so that it puts my hand under his head. So he just ends up sleeping on it. I go, you are such a brilliant dog.
Very cute.
Love him so much. So we'll have a few more questions, and then we will be respectful of your time, and you can have fun doing.
I'm gonna cook some dinner.
Ooh, nice. Anything fun on the menu tonight?
I already made today. Just before I did this, I made fresh guacamole and I made fresh pico de gallo from scratch. I don't know what the dinner is going to be yet, but I'm trying to think what we have. We got chicken, we have steak. I don't know. We'll see.
Sounds yummy. I just made a quesadilla before we did this, so.
My favorite cuisine. Mexican food is my favorite.
So good. So good.
Yeah. What else?
Sunny asks, BJ's hair color acts as a mood ring. Would you like to have that ability? What color would your hair be? It's a great question. It is. It's a fun question. And just where is the answer going to go? Is it are you writing an essay? Are you or you just want to know? You have to know. I'm always willing to answer questions, whether they are completely serious or totally hypothetical. Exactly.
But also kudos to you for knowing enough that it's a mood ring. That's something we be very, very pointedly discussed about the hair. Why we didn't want to just change colors. There was a moment where I had a sort of a suit that had LEDs in it that would change colors instantly. Like it would be like I could change the stripes red if I got angry. It just started looking, it was too cumbersome and to make the suit that way. It wasn't going to move well, so we never ended up doing it. But the test of it exists, and it was cool. But yeah, the hair changes and all that, and it is a mood ring, and it is fun to like sort of speculate what purple might mean. And the answer is no. I don't wish I had that, but that's not a fun answer. So if I did have it, I would hope that I could at least knock out a couple of these grays that I'm getting by being here, by being happy. So as long as I stay happy, no grays. That would be a fun superpower. Then you'd know when I was feeling a bit morose, you'd see a couple of streaks of salt and pepper come through, and you'd be like, "Oh, leave him alone. He's sad."
That's kind of like Rogue, right, from X-Men?
Yes, me and Rogue have a lot in common.
It's good to know. Are you a big superhero person?
I'm not a big superhero person, but I think I've seen probably all the movies. Cool. But I don't really have I'm not really into the mythology of it all, or I just enjoy them for what they are. I tried reading comics as a kid. It didn't take.
Interesting. This is where we're different. I love superheroes.
I love it. I love when people love things. I love the Great British Baking Show. So how about that?
Yes. Oh, it's so good. So much fun.
Yeah, those are my superheroes.
Oh, true.
Yeah.
Do you love a good English accent as well?
Yeah.
So this is like a me question. When you get to say it's showtime, is that like an exciting moment because you know there's been such a buildup?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like that's one of those when you do an adaptation, you know that there are like a couple specific things you have to do, right? So like for example, this is an example not about Beetlejuice, but in Pretty Woman, they had to do the snapping of the thing. And it has to be, just like at Showtime, it's got to be hard to like replicate that all the time to satisfy the people that have come to see it. Mm-hmm. So, and I know that like there were some days where like Samantha Barkley and Andy Carr were like, it's like they didn't really feel it. Or they must have, because I'm sure that like everyone has those days. So it's much easier to do the other stuff that's not necessarily from the movie that you need to deliver in the way that people are expecting. But thankfully, we made my Beetlejuice so wildly different than the one from the movie and the cartoon that, like, even when I said it's Showtime, the people would just go nuts for the words. Yeah. So I didn't have to sort of dig into sort of the movie version, which is a lot lower and deeper in the throat. And I don't remember the one from the cartoon. So, yeah, it was always exciting, easily, because it is a moment where literally two ballyhoo spotlights hit you and you get to say something and then make lightning happen. So speaking of superheroes, I mean, you truly feel like you are made of magic in that show, because anything I do was accompanied by a sound effect, a light cue, or a special effect. Mm-hmm. So you do get that weird like power trip thing where you're like, I'm just going to do this and fire's going to come out of my hands. And then it does.
And that's one of the coolest parts. Beetlejuice does this so well, but there are so many people that it takes to make sure everything happens, right? The lighting, the sound, everything has to be perfect for that superhero effect. And so when you've been having these like Beetlejuice, like Zoom sessions or anything like, is that something that you miss too? Just like the humanity of how big the production is?
That's the main thing I miss. The main thing, I don't miss performing more than I miss the people at the theater way more than I do miss the show. I miss, and I mean everybody. I'm talking about all the people. Everybody cultivates relationships with everyone backstage, with the band, with the stage manager, with the people on the fly system and the spotlights. I've known Meredith, who does the spotlights, who does my spotlight, from School of Rock to now. That's like a huge long-term relationship that I've had with somebody, and it's the person that lights me on stage. And I just miss seeing those people. I can smell her right now. She has a perfume that she's had since I've known her. And it's just very unique to her. And so I miss all those little things. I miss, and everybody in the building was so cool. There was very few, jerks. And even if you were a jerk, it ended pretty quickly because you were surrounded by so many great people. I notoriously will just come around to people's rooms every night and chat and all that and remind not consciously remind people that this is just a fun thing that we do and aren't we lucky to be here, but it ends up having that effect. But I just do it selfishly because I like having friends.
Yeah, it's good.
I miss it. I miss it a lot.
Yeah, I bet. And you one of the cool things, and you've spoken about this a bunch, but how Cats in the Winter Garden was your first show,
Yeah.
and then the fact that Bowl School of Rock and Beetlejuice are in the Winter Garden. Is that some cool like way of Broadway God saying like this is where you're meant to be?
I mean, if you believe in Broadway gods, then sure. But it really, I look at things like that, like coincidences and stuff like that as like bumper. I always think about life as bumper cars. Like, I think that it's not, I don't necessarily have a super duper religious thing about me. So I look at, I would say I'm a spiritual leaning atheist. I believe that something's going on, but I don't necessarily know. And so I guess agnostic would be the closest term to something. But really, I just look at life in general as like bumper cars, where you're in a bumper car thing, you bump into certain people, they send you off into certain directions, or they don't, or you never bump into some people you see in the bumper car arena, and you'll never ever. And so sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But either way, it's just kind of, in my opinion, it feels like chaos. Yeah. And so when things are weirdly, like the Winter Garden twice when it was my first thing, I look at it like it's cool. I don't look any deeper than like it's cool. Like it's like a very cool coincidence. I don't look for further signs for anything else other than that it is cool and I'm grateful to have the job.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Do you remember where you were sitting and do you ever look to that spot?
Oh yeah, big time. I don't remember the exact seat, but it is close to where Rob McClure sat, which his first Broadway show was Cats too. So I know that it was in the it's this audience right. So stage left, mezzanine, couple rows up, couple seats in, and from the aisle, and I don't remember exactly where, but I know the vicinity, and it is fun to sometimes look up there and sort of go, "Wow, what a difference 21 years makes."
Right, that's incredible. And for what will probably be our last fan question, JNJ asks, favorite Goosebumps book, and what was it like to meet the author?
And that's a great question. That is I'll answer Goosebumps questions all day. This is an entirely other hour of my life if you want. That is a great question. And that one does change day to day because I always think about them. I see them at the bookstores. When I go to a bookstore, I will always go to the Goosebumps section to like relive covers, and I own a bunch of them. And I got to say, okay, I think Monster Blood number one, because there's a couple, they do a series of Monster Bloods. But I think the Haunted Mask is one of the creepiest ones because it is about like you put a mask on and then you can't take it off. And not only that, it fuses to your skin and you become the thing. So I think those two right now would have to say are my favorites. And meeting R.L. Stine was awesome. It was so fun to talk to him. And he's nothing like his books. He's so, and I say this as a positive, he's so nebbishy and so like just a guy that likes baseball and, just kind of talks like this and talks about scary stuff. And I was like so enamored with the idea that he's just a dude and like he has great, really scary ideas and fun ideas. It was a true, like, that's one where I remember knowing it was a possibility. And I don't tend to like really go like, get me an interview with him. But I was like, if you can get me an interview with me and him in the same room, I won't ever ask you for anything else ever. I won't make any demands. And so getting to do that was like during this really crazy time where like we had no time and they made time to do it and I made time to do it. And so I remember they took I took like 20 minutes to take a nap before that in the whole day, 20 minutes to myself. And this hotel that we were in graciously gave me what was called like a nap room. And I literally napped for 25 minutes. They knocked on the door. I got dressed. We did the interview. But it was worth it. It was the best. Getting to meet him and be like, I've read literally all of your books, and getting to chat about them. It sort of creeped him out. He was like, you know way too much about me.
Now I guess you know what other people feel about meeting you.
Yeah, that's right. But also the other thing, which is crazy, the video that's online, there's like a video of me meeting R.L. Stine and through Beetlejuice. I think you can find it on Beetlejuice's YouTube. It's like 2 minutes long, if that. And we chatted for an hour on screen. So there's so much great footage that's somewhere about us chatting that I hope that someday they might release if we come back, and they might be able to like dig up some of that stuff because it was some good chatting.
That's really cool. And then my last big question here is I love how you were talking about just being a fan and how like you remember as a kid being behind like the barricades at the stage door
Oh
and
yeah.
you still would do that. And I know because of many reasons that hasn't you haven't been able to do the stage door as much as you would like to. What are there any comments or thoughts about that? And then just like what do you want to make sure your fans hear like directly from you to them?
Sure. I mean, the first thing is that in reverse chronological order, the reason a lot of us and me specifically didn't do the stage door was we heard there was a virus going around. That was the reverse chronological order. Two, my life started to become not just about Beetlejuice. So I needed a little more of my time to myself, and the stage door started to become an hour plus, even if we were going fast. The stage door became, and I say this with love, a bit unmanageable because it was like 6 people deep all the way down the block. And everybody was very cool. There was, for every 100 people, there's probably, I would say for every 200 people, there's probably one stinker. But it's usually never their fault, and they just don't know how to conduct themselves. And so I don't blame them. But so it's less about the type of people. It was just that were I to do the stage door in the way I like to do it, I would have gotten home at 1 a.m. So, and I needed that time, not just to sleep, but to actually walk my dog and work on some projects that I actually have deadlines for. So that's the other reverse chronological. And then right before that, I had some sort of odd thing happen where, someone didn't want me to come out for some threatening reason. So I took some time off, certainly because of that. But I hope when we come back, we'll be able to figure out a way for it to happen, because it's one of my favorite things to do. I get so much joy out of it. It's selfish. It's blasphemous how much joy I get out of it. It's very easy to feel famous when you're not. So that's one. And two, to everybody who's a fan of the show and a fan of Beetlejuice, or even if you're a fan of mine, I am trying my best to stay put so that soon I won't have to. And we can do our show. I can't speak at all to what's going to happen with our show. I know the same date you do, June 6th. So if we make it, we make it. If not, we will hopefully find another spot to revive, no pun intended, Beetlejuice in a new place. But if we don't do either of those things, there's so much Beetlejuice still to come, and so much more things that have already been generated out of this that you will not be you will be inundated with enough Beetlejuice for years to come, even if it's not on Broadway. And it will be stuff that we are very proud of. It's stuff that I think you will be very proud of, and it's very on brand for the show. So I'm excited to be a part of it for more years to come, for sure. But my hope is that we get better enough to close it. And then if we get better enough to close it, I hope we get better enough to reopen it somewhere else. But for now, it is about staying healthy. So if you are one of those people that doesn't take this seriously, take it seriously. Because the less you take it seriously, the more we're not going to be able to do our show. And everyone else is not going to be able to do their thing. Mm-hmm. So don't be selfish. Be selfless. And if you're going to be selfish with anybody, be selfish with yourself. Do things for yourself while you're at home. Give yourself that spa day that you didn't get to have, that you've been complaining about that you wanted. Now's the time. Anybody who says, I'm working on that play, well, now you don't have any excuse not to finish it. So go do the thing that you've always promised yourself you would do, and stay inside.
Yes, stay inside. And are there any things that you want to promote, have people keep an eye on, or any charities besides from say, to donate to?
I would say the only thing I'm promoting is myself. So you can just follow me on Twitter. That's where I exist. If anyone finds me anywhere else, it's not me. But I am at @BrightMonster on Twitter. Obviously, always I want to bring up to donate to the Actors Fund. It's the thing that everybody's donating to. You should. If you don't have enough money to donate, that's fine. But just don't. You don't need to tell people that you are broke. It's okay to not have enough money to donate. You need to live. We completely understand that. Yes. All we are asking that if you have $1 that you wouldn't mind missing, that's where it should go at this time. but yeah, that's it. I'm very grateful that I am where I am. I hope that everyone out there is staying as safe as they possibly can be, and maybe having a bit of fun.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Everyone, this will be on my bwaySHO YouTube channel forever, so you can check it out whenever you would like. And there's a whole Beetlejuice playlist from our interviews and videos from their performances before. So check it out. Thank you and have a great day. We'll see you at the show.
Peace out.